Hey guys, welcome back to Fire Creek Forge. Today I'm going to show you the most offensive and controversial video I've ever put up on this channel. I eventually delisted it after posting it about 8 years ago. Just because of the negativity surrounding it, YouTube started restricting it, figured it just wasn't worth it. But I'm bringing it back in this format as a reaction video for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think it's an interesting video that may have some educational use to it for somebody. And secondly, it's sort of a walk down memory lane or a picture into the early stages or early history of Fire Creek Forge. This video kind of captures a little bit of the ethos of Fire Creek Forge, the practical application, these knives that I build that are born out of real world use. And so I want to share this video in that format. Disclaimer though, if you are squeamish and don't like blood, guts, or meat that isn't packaged in a cellophane wrapper, you might not want to watch this video. And if you're a child, then that might apply to you as well. So let's jump into it. Hello everyone, Elijah Williams with FireCreekForge.com. Previously Williams Built Blades, and actually I'm not sure if I'm not going to keep the Williams Built Blades name or not. Sort of an identity crisis. Either way, this video is going to be of me quartering up a bear carcass that somebody gifted us. So in the beginning, when I first started making knives, I started selling them under the name Williams Built Blades. It's sort of a play on Randall Made Knives, and I thought it was a great name, but after a couple of years, I switched because a couple of reasons. One, people kept thinking my name was William, which I didn't understand why they thought that. But anyway, the second reason is I also started Fire Creek Forge very early on alongside it, but as more of a blacksmithing type business where I would make a lot of decorative, useful household items and things like that. Eventually it became clear that having two different brands wasn't really, or just even two different businesses to operate under, was too much to handle. I needed to consolidate and focus my efforts in. And so before very long, everything was under Fire Creek Forge, which I felt like was a good brand that we could build over the next however many years. And then my forged goods sort of tapered off as I was able to build the blade side of it more, which was what my passion was in the beginning anyway. Bear meat's pretty decent around here, so we enjoy it. And I don't have a tripod on me, unfortunately. So I'm gonna try. So this was in Idaho, where we moved from. We now live in Texas, but bear hunting is fairly common practice there. And there were some people at church that we knew a little bit that had some dogs, and they would bear hunt on a regular basis the spring and fall seasons. And they gave us this bear carcass because, you know, you can only eat so much bear, right? And we made good use of it. This was when we were living on our good friend's farm in a cabin that we built. I don't know if the cabin was built right at this point. I think this was early on. But we were, trying to build this business. I was still working building houses for a custom home builder at the time, so I was not full-time at the knife making yet. And things were tight, you know, and we weren't going to turn down some decent wild game. To make this work without one, so bear with me if you will. It's been relatively eventful for us. We had an unexpected move. So this is a 4 front legs here. So we got this. We just moved to our friend's farm because we were living in a single wide trailer on a nice 20-acre piece, really beautiful little piece of property. But there was a black mold problem in the trailer that we were not aware of until we were all getting very sick, and eventually discovered actually that the floor was falling in underneath the refrigerator with an unknown leak. Long story short, we got out of there. Our health was severely jeopardized, and we spent years kind of recovering. It takes a long time. But anyway, that's why we had to get out of there and why we were where we are now in this video. First front leg mostly quartered, or cut off right here. Lay that aside. Get the second one as well. I'm using it's kind of a prototype. It's very similar to the Little Scout knife that I make, but it's narrower overall. So very handy size for this kind of thing and general bushcraft and whatever else you want to use it for. So when you're quartering, you need to get up around the scapula on the front of the animal, and they vary a little. So this is a black bear. Black bears aren't generally very large, as you can tell, but this just goes to show you that you don't need a large knife for most game, most field dressing applications or quartering or whatever, meat processing. This knife right here is pretty small. It's I don't know, about a 3-inch blade, maybe 3.5, and it's doing the job just quite nicely. They're all very similar, since I'm talking a 4-legged critter. This isn't the best setup, but I stuck this in the stock trailer overnight to keep cats and dogs off of it, and it was cool enough, so it's cooled out pretty good. We're just going to make all of it into burger, so we enjoy bear burger. Mix it up with some beef if you want to. Works pretty good. So anyway, this particular knife I'm using is a 440C stainless, but I can also make it out of 01 tool steel or 1095, or basically whatever you want it out of. I have made very few knives out of 440C stainless. I discovered after the fact, as I continued to study metallurgy and stuff, that I didn't have the proper heat treating apparatus to use 440C, and in fact there's actually better, in my opinion, options for a good stainless blade like S35VN and stuff like that, AEBL. And so this might be one of the 2 or 3 knives that I ever made out of 440C stainless. But you can also tell here is that I'm trying to, and I should have changed the camera angle, not great cinematography here in the early years, but I'm trying to separate the hindquarter from the pelvic bone by getting into that joint there at the femur. And you want to keep your knife away from the bone on any animal as you're quartering or field dressing, and it's going to stay sharp for, you know, multiple animals if you do that. If you get crazy and start hacking on the bone and stuff, I don't care what knife you're using, it's gonna dull up a lot faster. But people with experience, and that's not really me, I know enough to get the job done. I'm not a super experienced, you know, meat cutter or anything like that, but I do know enough to keep the edge away from the bone at least. I may have to get a saw in here at some point. Probably. Anyway, so like I say, we had an unexpected move. We are now in a temporary living situation. Working on building the businesses. So it's been good. I'm also doing the local farmers market, selling knives and other forged stuff there as well. So it's been good. And anyway, that's kind of the update for those of you for both of you who wanted to hear that. Yeah, those early years, we have an interesting story, and my wife has supported me and supported us through that whole thing. So I would have never been able to do beyond this journey without her support like that. And just thinking back, you know, we're in such a different place now than we were back then. But it took going through those early tough times and stuff to get to where we are now. And it's a journey that's continuing on, that's for sure. And since the angle on this video is so poor, it's not going to make a very good tutorial on quartering bear or anything else, but I've got the hind leg freed up. Obviously just the old hip socket there. So one more to do here. Go ahead and flip it around here. You can see what I'm doing. You notice the color on that, it's real dark. That's a good sign. You see that on a lot of wild game. It's good meat compared to most of what you buy in the grocery store. Anyway, I'm thinking of calling this knife the Hunter Gatherer, just because I totally forgot that. I didn't remember that I was going to name it that. But other funny story, well, it's not funny, but after this video at some point, I was working down in the shop and not being very careful on something. I was using that knife to, I don't know what I don't even remember. I was doing something with that knife and I went to set it down next to my grinder that was running. And on my old grinder that I still have, it's got an open pulleys on it with a belt. And that stupid lanyard caught in that belt, and it slung it around and nearly cut the end of my thumb off. And then I walked back up to the farmhouse, and after a couple shots of brandy or something, and I had to lay down on the couch, my wife stitched up the end of my thumb. Good times. That's why I don't like lanyards for the most part. Such a great all-purpose design. And it really just depends on what you need it for. I realize that no one design works for everybody, which is why I make a bunch of different knife designs and take custom orders. So that's the story on that. Anyway, this is the first bear I've quartered, so bear with me. Like I said, it's pretty similar. It's not a whole lot different than like a deer, but it sure has a lot more fat on it than any deer I've ever shot. And it's probably easier if it's hanging up, but anyway, I'm getting through it. Some of these operations here, it might be helpful to have a little bit bigger knife. I'm thinking like the Nessmuck. I wish I had one of those on hand for parts of this anyway. Anyway, this knife's an 1/8 inch thick steel. On the blade, it's got a hollow grind on it. Heat treated to a 59 to 60 Rockwell hardness, so a real good compromise between edge holding capability and sharpening ability. Because no matter how good it holds an edge, it's going to dull eventually. You need to be able to sharpen it relatively easily as well. So, but so anyway, I like actually testing the knives I make in the real world. So you see how I got through that hip socket there, and what you're trying to do is just cut meat and cartilage, and you're trying not to contact the bone. And as long as you do that and you stay away from the bone, your edge is gonna, whatever it is you're using, whatever knife you're using, is gonna last much longer. And you can do multiple animals with the same knife without really sharpening it. Circumstances. So, you know, I design and build my knives based off of my experience that's ongoing. Yeah, this has been something that's always been important to me. Making knives is that the designs I'm making are functional and they're based on my experience and other experience that I glean from other sources and stuff. They actually work. I just don't really have any use for a knife that you can't use, that doesn't work well. That's just not what I do. So opportunities like those, I always try to take when I can, have in the past and will in the future, just to, test out the designs and the grinds and everything. So this was one of those times. And I didn't pay attention my bear anatomy classes, so I don't know exactly what part's hanging up here. So anyway, this is going to all be bear burger. Rib cage, neck. Trying to cut it down to slightly more manageable sized pieces. Another great story with this bear carcass or bear meat is after this was all done, of course, and we got it all ground up into burger. Sometime later, several months later, we were having dinner with our friends whose place we lived on at the time. And we invited some other friends who had like a year or two before moved up from California. And we invited them out, and we had bear burger spaghetti, which to us was really good. And but there's a whole story surrounding that where they came out to the farm there and were like freaking out because to them it was out in the middle of nowhere. To us it was just, down the road a ways kind of a thing. And we fed them bear burger spaghetti. And anyway, so they've told us the story of how they've told that story to like their California friends and stuff like that for years, and it's a hoot. It's funny. This is all gonna have to be boned out, but this fat on this thing is like, whew, it's like an inch thick. But it's a fall bear going into winter, or not yet, close to going into winter, so that makes sense, obviously. Anyway, hopefully this was mildly interesting to you, and buy a knife, please. Yeah, shameless plug there. You can tell that salesmanship probably is not my strong suit. Next video I'm thinking about just doing one on how to put a little snake knot lanyard on your knife. No. And you can stay tuned for that. Hopefully this video was somewhat interesting. And we're still on Facebook. We're under Fire Creek Forge on Facebook, firecreekforge.com. Making more knives than ever. And if you have any questions, email, leave a message on the YouTube, and so on and so forth. So thanks for watching. All right, well, there you have it. Blast from the past. 8 years ago, man. It's hard to believe how much time has gone by since we started on this journey. And I know there's some of you that have been watching since then, so I want to thank you specifically for sticking around this long. And for those of you that haven't been around this long but have, maybe just showed up in the last week and subscribed to the channel, I want to thank you as well, because this is an ongoing journey, and maybe this gives you a little bit of just a little window of insight into kind of the ethos of Fire Creek Forge as a business and as a channel. And we're gonna keep on plugging away. So anyway, appreciate you watching. See you on the next video.